Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Wild and the Whites podcast. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, tonight we decided that we're going to talk a little bit, or a lot of it, whatever we decide to, about trail cameras and how to use them. And I'll probably get into, some people have a discussion as to the ethics of trail cameras and everything too. So we can get into that if we feel like it. But I would try to keep it maybe on more of just like a basic introductory type thing of like...
Part 1.
Yes. We can... with trail cameras, we can go down a freaking rabbit hole like crazy. Everything from the legislature to it and to the ethics of it and...
What kind of batteries are best?
Or SD cards.
Apparently there is a difference.
To some people.
Well,
or you're me who just am like, oh, which are the cheapest ones? And I just buy the cheapest ones and then they work for me.
Mine were like $8.
Okay, well, I don't know how much I spent.
So yes, trail cams. If newbie Newman here, if I'm gonna start going out, I want to see what's going on in my local woods.
Yeah.
What am I doing? Like, I've listened to the podcast we've talked about with the rest of you guys. So, with that information, clearly I'm thinking, I'm looking for trails, right? I'm going to be following some trails because obviously if I find a trail, there's going to be something on there. Trails are long and varying. There's many different paths you can take, and I chose the one less traveled. But where do I put it? Especially in the early season when you don't have a lot of other signs, right?
And so there's two questions that if you legitimately came to me and asked this question.
I'm legitimately coming to you asking you this question.
Okay, sorry. Bear with us. It's been a long day. What time? There are two questions that I would ask. One is what time of year is it?
Okay.
And two, what are you trying to get out of this footage? All right. And what I mean by that is, are you trying to get a vast inventory of everything that's going on? Mm-hmm. Are you trying to get a specific pattern on a specific place? What would be your goal with it? And I can kind of touch on all those different things, you know?
And forgive my ignorance, sir. Mm-hmm. If I'm going out to an area that I've never hunted before because I'm brand new, I have no idea what the inventory of critters are in that area. Sure. So I'm assuming that I'm going to take a trail cam, I'm going to put it up on a trail, and over the course of the next week or two, just see what's there.
Right.
And, okay, I've got deer going that way, but none are coming this way, so let's go further down that trail maybe.
Cool. I like that. Yep.
All right, if forks or triples or whatever, there's a big intersection, I'm going to pick this one over here. Is it more of just like trial and error over the course of seasons?
It is when you're first starting them. And that's why I have a lot of cameras, because I've been doing a lot of trial and error with it. And so how I use cameras, this is very particular to me, primarily, is to learn about if what I think is going on is correct.
Okay.
So if I see sign and I say, I think that this sign means this. You know what I mean? So like I see a bunch of what I think is feeding sign. I can put a camera up and confirm what I'm seeing. So basically, I've utilized cameras through my learning process in hunting to be like, I think I know what that means. Like I've seen that before, or I've never seen that before. What does that mean? Set up a camera on it, and if all of a sudden you check the card after 6 months of that camera being out there and there's not a single deer on it, you're like, okay, that wasn't deer sign.
That was nothing.
Right. Okay. Or it could be like, oh, that's what that is.
Okay.
So that's what I've been primarily using cameras for. But now I use a lot of cameras for like, I still use it for that purpose, but I kind of use them just to like get cool pictures of things. So like a lot of my I have 20 cameras, and they're a bunch of them are just like non-cell cameras, and then I have a handful of cell cameras.
Okay.
The cell cameras I tend to use on areas where I just kind of want to know what's in there, or like we talked about scrapes and how they are visited over and over again by deer. Well, that's a great spot if we're in the pre-rut and you want to know what deer are in that area. Well, set up a camera on a scrape, because that's when you're going to kind of inventory what's around, right? So a cell cam on that's great, because if you have cell service and you can put a cell cam on it, then you don't have to keep going out to it and putting your scent in an area, right?
You can kind of just let it soak and get real-time feedback. Gotcha.
Yep. And if you're not blowing up that area with your scent consistently, then the activity should still maintain the same thing, right? And then all you got to do to stay legal with it, if you're going to go hunt there, just turn your cell, the camera, you can just disable it on your phone for 24 hours. So then you're not receiving pictures from it for 24 hours, and you stay legal on that camera, and you can go out and hunt it. Because in the state of New Hampshire, at least, all states have different laws. So if you're hunting different states, make sure you get up on the laws in that state. But like in New Hampshire, if you get a picture of an animal on a cell cam, you cannot go and hunt that animal or that area for 24 hours. So it preserves the fair chase of it, right? So if you see a buck pass in front of your camera and it's snowing, you can't go, sweet, I'm going to go run up there and stand on his track and go after him.
Right.
It's just not fair, right? So
levels the field a little bit.
That's where we get into that discussion, and that goes into the ethics whole thing that I was talking about, right? So anyway, so that's what I use cell cams for, is to go into those areas and try to get an idea of what's going on. If I can pattern stuff, great, but inventory stuff in areas that I don't want my scent continuously in. But then there's plenty of areas around here that don't have cell service that you still want to access. So that's why I have a bunch of just dumb cameras that don't have a connection to cellular data. And that's when you have to be careful about when you're going out there and getting those SD cards and what you're laying down for scent and everything like that, which is a whole...
Every time you go out there, you're waving flags. Gotcha.
Right. So that's where we can get into a whole discussion about that sometime too. We could do an episode just on what I do for scent control, because if I'm going out to check one of those cameras, do I always do it? No, but I should be practicing the same scent control as though I was hunting that area.
Right.
So, and then the other thing that I do is I've got like 5 cameras that are really inexpensive, non-cellular, and those cameras are for areas that I want to monitor for a year. I want to see, and this is again going back to my learning process, what happens in an area like this from February to February.
Right.
So in February I find this spot and I'm like, man, this looks cool because of whatever reason, and I throw a camera up on it and I leave it there. And if it gets ruined, it's like a $30 camera, and it's $30 out of my pocket, but it's not like some of these cameras that are well over $100.
Right.
I mean, you can go on like Midway USA and find bundles of like 3 cameras for like $80.
Oh, geez. Okay.
You know, so like that take very good pictures and videos.
Right.
And you take those, you set them up, and I leave them for a year. I have some that I've done that, and I've got them logged where they are on my Onyx, and I put them up last year during like shed hunting season. And next shed hunting season, I'm going to go back and look for sheds in those same spots, and I'll pull those cameras, and I'll have a great time going through thousands of photographs, hopefully, or maybe 2, and being like, well, I'm sat there for no reason.
Not going to go there again.
Right. But that's a cool way to be like, what happens all year round? And you could just sit in an afternoon and go through all these photographs and pick apart what happens all year long. Why on October 9th were the bucks roaming through there again? Oh, that's right. The 8th is when I found my first scrape. So they were starting to roam. So now, and then you start clicking through more, and you're like, oh, more bucks. Okay, so this is a pinch point where all the bucks are roaming through, or whatever it might be, right? You can sit there and get just like a real time, like a reel of the whole year in one shot. So that's I love those cameras because it's a cool afternoon to sit there and go through one. So those are kind of like the ways that I use cameras. So going back to what you originally asked, you have a camera. It's your first camera. You're a new hunter.
I love my camera.
What do you want to do with it? So, I would ask you, are you gun hunting or are you archery hunting?
Well, I can't pull a bow back.
Right. But when you get your crossbow permit, you could go out archery hunting.
But as of right now, I'm looking at rifle hunting.
Okay, so we'll just talk about rifle hunting. So we're talking about the rut phases, because rifle season's going to start either the first or the second week of November every year. This year it happens to be the second week of November in New Hampshire, but usually it starts the first week of November. Take that camera. If you've found a good scrape, like a good community scrape that's deep, that's maybe got some drop-ins in it, or it's just wide and you can tell that it's a community scrape and the roots are showing and all that stuff, like, great. Throw it on that scrape, and that'll give you an inventory of the deer in that area, and it'll hopefully maybe pattern something coming to that area too.
Okay.
Or throw it on a pinch point. Okay. Or like saddles, pinch points, like they're all kind of the same thing. Some place where there's a concentration of a path of least resistance that the deer are constantly walking. Okay, so those deep game paths that I've talked about in the past, if you can find that and it goes through a pinch point, a path of least resistance, that could be a nice bench on the side of a ridge line. It could be a stream crossing. It could anything like that. That's where you want your camera.
Gotcha.
For rifle, because that's where. So the bucks are going to be roaming throughout rifle season. They're not going to be patternable. Period. So what you're looking for is put a camera up in these areas, and is it consistently getting regular activity of something going through there?
In other words, something that's worth your time to go sit.
Yes, right? Okay. Because cameras are not going to help you with tracking. They're not going to help you with still hunting. But they're going to help you with sitting in one spot. So if you are on a run and you set it up and you let it sit for 2 weeks. So say you set it up the last week of October or the second to last week of October, and you grab it the first or second week in November. And you start to see, and towards the end of that card, a pickup of just, you're getting deer all the time, and a lot of bucks are roaming right by that, both directions. Awesome. Like, or even one direction. Cool. That would be a good spot to just sit there and try to grab anything that walks by.
Gotcha.
Right? Because the problem here that we have in the Northeast is we're not hunting farmland in Pennsylvania or Missouri or Ohio or Indiana. Excuse me.
What do you mean by that?
Yep. Sorry, I'm just like choking on my dry throat. So in those areas, the concentrations of does are so much higher in one area that the bucks don't often have to go that far. Here in the Northeast, they have to travel. So bucks will roam like crazy when it comes to the rut. And what they do is they basically know this is the area that I'm willing to roam in. And it could be a 3-mile loop. It could be a 15-mile loop, depending on the buck. It's just the personality of the buck. Okay. And they go, in that loop, I've got does here, 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 and here. And all they do is they roam that loop and keep checking their does. And they've laid down scrapes near those does, right? When they're roaming, I say to set up a camera on a scrape because they might visit it or other bucks might visit it. But chances are they're cruising downwind of that scrape and they're smelling it from yards away. They're not going right up to the scrape anymore.
Right.
So they're just cruising, they're having a good time, and they are just covering ground. So that's why, like, in the middle to end of October, you see these bucks that are just built, right? Like, huge tanks of bucks. By the end of November, they have lost so much weight because that's all they've been doing. They haven't been feeding right. They haven't been drinking water. They have been roaming and breeding, and that's it that they care about. And some of them, like towards the end of November, they get real tired. They get really, really tired. So, anyway, that's a whole other discussion. But, so if you're rifle hunting, don't necessarily think about patterning up here in the Northeast because that's going to be very, very difficult. The only pattern that you might be able to get is his loop. Okay? So if you set up a camera in a pinch point and you get a buck that goes by and then 3 days later that same buck goes by, take note of that. Because then all of a sudden maybe 3 days later that buck goes by again, you're like, okay, he's on like a 3-day loop. Maybe the following time it takes 4 days for him to do that. Well, he probably sat with a doe for 24 hours because she was ready. And bucks, so deer don't just breed once. So when doe is typically hot for roughly like 24 to 48 hours, he's going to breed her several times during that span. And he's going to stay with her to fight off any other suitors. So maybe it takes 4 days the next time. Well, that could just mean that he was with a doe for 24 hours. He's still on a 3-day loop and he's still doing the same loop. That's like the only pattern that you might be able to get, but that's pretty tough to get.
Right.
You gotta be spot on and locked into a specific area that buck is really just roaming all the time. Like a really, really good major path of least resistance that buck walks through. And if you're in snow and you find a track, like remember where that track is because he's looping. So if you find a good solid track and you can find a pinch point that track goes through, set up a camera there because when he's on his loop, he's more than likely going to hit that pinch point. He probably just told you where that pinch point is. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That path of least resistance. If he's going up a ridge and he cuts right through one of those little dips between peaks, throw it there, and try to then we can get into like camera angles, trying to cover as much ground as you can with one angle. And the other thing I'm going to say, you talked about rut, but if you're talking about going into a buck's territory and laying down a camera, mature bucks are very attuned to their surroundings. That's how they got mature, is being good at survival. So if you throw a camera out there that's got some human scent on it, it looks weird, he's never seen it on that tree before, and maybe you don't have a really expensive one, so there's like an IR light that blinks a little bit, or a little red light, so he's gonna go, what in the heck is that? I don't want anything to do with this spot. And he may get out of here. They're not like does. He can be like, screw it, I'm out, I'm gonna go find a different spot. So what I've found is very this isn't my idea either, this is stuff that I got from other people that know way more about this than I do, but I've found it effective in my own experience, is taking that camera and putting it either as high up as you can possibly reach, and then taking a stick and jamming it behind it to angle the camera down, or even taking one of our like sticks that we use to climb trees and just put one of those up and stand on the top of that and get it even higher than you can reach, and really get it just out of that plane of their view and angle it downward so you can obviously get the pictures that you want and see everything.
That makes sense.
Otherwise you'll just get the woodpeckers. But then it's not right there. Usually people say set up that camera 3 feet up off the ground, you'll get everything, and you will, but he's going to see that. And if you're just in an area where you're getting juvenile bucks and does and stuff like that, and you want to throw a camera like that, cool, that's fine.
Right.
If a bear comes along, he's going to take that thing and he's going to smash it. If it's high up in a tree, the bears may be less opted to do that too, so it kind of protects it from bears as well. But that's a little tip for placement of cameras, angles, is to get them up high, either as high as you can reach or get them even higher if you want. But I always put them above my head height, always. So
is there anything else that you would like, little tricks or something to disguise a new camera? I mean, they're camouflaged. They come in all sorts of weird shapes and sizes.
You mean like from people, or what are you?
From animals.
From animals.
If I'm going into a spot and I don't want this buck to see it, putting it up high is going to help. Are there any other things that you can do?
Sight-wise, I would say it doesn't matter as much. I think just getting it out of their plane of view is the important thing. But animals see the world through their noses more than they do their eyes. So if you really want to get super into it, wearing like latex gloves or something like that and not putting your fingers all over it, I've never really done that. I really haven't. The only times that I will do it is like yesterday, for example. I found that scrape and I wanted to put a scrape on it. I wore gloves while I was handling my camera to not get my fingers all over it, because I was in his area. I was on top of a scrape where he's probably going to be coming back.
He'll be back to
right
in that area.
And in my opinion, I think he might be a mature buck, because he's getting a lot of testosterone very quickly. So he's probably experienced something before that I want to try to avoid.
Right.
Him queuing in of like, oh, people. So that's why, like,
know that smell.
I was wearing a ton of scent lock. I was all sprayed down. I was like, like going in and everything. I did the whole rigmarole with it, and so I wasn't about to lose all of that I gained by wearing all my scent lock, spraying down everything, doing all my ozone treatments on my clothes and stuff like that,
just to leave your
just to lose my you put a camera there, by touching it I would lose everything that I did. So yeah, I mean, if you want to get into remembering that and you really want to go crazy, remember that you're leaving scent on it. Obviously I put a camera up on the bear bait typically. Legally you can't have a cell cam, so we're not talking about a cell cam, we're talking about just like a regular camera. Bears, if you are baiting and you've got yum-yums all over your hands, and then you touch your camera and you stick it up in a tree,
camera is now yum-yums.
Exactly, so be careful of that.
You're not going to know until you go to look for it.
Right. Yeah. But honestly, like just your hands and that weird scent, bears don't like. They're gonna look all over it. I shouldn't say they don't like it. They're just curious about it. Is really what it is.
That doesn't belong there.
Yeah. So they're like, "What is this?" And what does a dog do when it's trying to investigate something? Puts it in its mouth, right? Bears are the same exact thing. Okay, so it's gonna just. And when a bear's doing that to your lovely little camera, that camera doesn't usually stand much of a chance. They're not biting it; they're just investigating it. But it's good enough to do some damage, right?
Yeah, I can imagine.
So that's another thing. Getting that camera up high when you leave that scent on it, it gets it away from the bears. And then also, if your scent's on it and it's chilling up high, remember that. Typically, deer don't look for threats from above. Okay? Even their eyes are built to see more on just like a straight plane. Okay? I've read some studies and listened to some stuff on studies of the actual eye of a deer. And the way that the inner eye is built is really based off of movement on a very limited plane. So if you can get out of that plane, it's remarkable how little they'll pay attention to you because they don't have any natural predators from above except for us, right? So if you've got a deer that's educated on the fact that it's been hunted before and it knows that death comes from above, however that may have occurred, that's different. But your average deer is not going to know that. So it's going to... so having your scent up here isn't going to be as worrisome as down here.
Right.
Because that's where danger comes from anyway. You put it 3 feet off the ground. What else is usually 3 feet off the ground? A coyote.
Everything else is trying to kill it.
Right. So, that's another thing to think of their natural abilities. But yeah, so it's kind of cool the way that their eye is built. It's based off of so much based off of their movement and the world being still while they're moving. And that's why a deer, like if you've ever watched a deer just bound through the woods and then you tried to go the same way and you're like, oh my god, how I'm just bashing your face off of sticks the whole time, you're dodging all these different things, and like you're like, that deer just cruised. Well, as it's moving, the rest of the world's still. As we're moving, the whole world is swirling all around us and we're trying to make sense of it, right? For a deer, it's not like that. So the deer is very based off of movement in its eyes. Not to go on a crazy tangent here, but that's why, like, if you've ever been on a stare down with a deer, the two things that they try to do is they try to move you in their eye. So they'll sit there and they'll move their head all around. And they're trying to kind of see what you're doing because they're trying to create movement themselves. That's all that they're trying to do. And then the other thing that they'll try to do is like they'll stamp the ground and try to get you to flinch or move or something so they can try to figure you out, because there's them picking up shapes is all based off the movement of that shape.
Okay.
Anyway, so
interesting.
Yeah. I'm such a weird nerd when it comes to these kinds of things. So like I'll read those and then I'll talk about it for an hour. But
tune in next week.
Yeah, right.
Weird things Zach has read.
Right.
About hunting.
Yep. There's a lot of that. I spent a lot of time listening to podcasts and reading stuff, and yep. In terms of the only other thing that I can think of is like still pictures versus videos. Obviously, videos take up a lot more card space. So like if you're doing one of those leave for a year and come pick it up, I would not recommend videos because you might find that it just filled up your card. And often cameras will be
especially the cheap ones you buy.
Yes. Well, they work. It is amazing what 16 gigs will give you, though. But if you the other thing is often cameras will allow you like a burst of photos, like 3, or you can just have like 1 photo. again, if you're doing one of those leave it for a year, just do one photo. Don't fill up your card. But I've found...
That's more of a scouting. You're not actually looking for a particular deer, so you need them to move.
Yep.
You're just looking to see, oh, there is a deer.
Yep.
Okay.
I've had a lot of photos where I wish that I had a burst set up, where it's like there's some movement, but you're like, what the heck is that? I don't really know. And then I've had the... What was that?
My pager.
Oh.
Just turned it off.
In my headphones, it sounded like some girl was just yelling out here.
She just yelled, "We got one."
Oh.
8 Merrill Street, White Mountain Student Apartments.
Oh, that's...
Smoke from cooker. Sorry.
I digress.
Yes. That's Janine from Ghostbusters.
Good Lord, man. Oh. Anyway, okay, so my apartment's not haunted.
Nope.
Thank you, Jesus. Anyway, so...
sometimes burst is good.
Burst is good, yes. No, honestly, so then there's been times where I have had a burst, and the first photo, you're like, what is that? And then the next two photos, it like shows the motion of whatever it was, and you can pick it up. So if you're going out there and checking it regularly, I'd recommend like a 3-photo burst on a lot of these things. It actually does help quite a bit, at least a 2-photo burst, because you never know exactly when something's going to trigger that camera, especially if you're getting inexpensive ones, and what that could be. So you get some cool stuff on that second or third photo. So but yeah, so I mean, in terms of like early season placement, if I'm like, we're in August and I want to go out bow hunting in September and I want to set up a camera, I would focus on roots in and out of bedding cover, and try, if you're trying to get a pattern of anything, find that bedding cover and just throw cameras up on the pinch points in and out of that, heading to like food or water or something like that, and that's when, in that early season, so like if you were talking like mid to late August through like mid-September, that's when they like really are patternable. So that's where like cameras can really come in handy if you want to try to kill something off of a camera pattern, because their lives are still in that summer routine of just, you know, bed down for the day, chill out, get up, walk over and feed a little bit and go back to bed, and then do that little bit of just grazing throughout the day and just the daylight hours. Morning. And then night comes and I get up and then I move out and I go to like a main food source and I hang out in that food source and do all these kinds of things, and then I bebop around and I do this, that, and the other, and then all right, the sun's about to come up and I'm gonna go back over to my bed and I'm gonna hang out in this cover now that it's sunlight, and they're in that pattern still because it's still typically warm. It's still like just in their heads of like living my life over the summer. It's when the weather switches to getting cold that they start going, oh, it's that time of year, and all the bucks go, oh yeah, it's that time of year, and they start getting that testosterone.
Easy, Bruce.
Was that a Hulk joke?
Finding Nemo. Yeah, no.
Oh, yes. I thought it was Bruce Banner, but no, totally. Nope. Works either way, right?
Just goes to show the type of shows you're watching, the type of shows I'm watching.
Yeah. Anyway, I digress.
Anyway.
So that camera's coming real handy during that period of time. But then when the weather switches and everything starts to move, then it's time to take those cameras, like right now, as I'm noticing the start of the pre-rut, I have so many cameras that I'm like, well, I don't need that one there. I don't need that one there. And I can go out when I'm in those areas and just grab them. And I now have these areas where I'm looking for scrapes. I'm looking for that sign, and I'm going to move those cameras onto those, right? So I'm transitioning as the deer are transitioning.
Because in this area, you don't need it because you're not seeing anything, so you can take that from that spot and now go, because you're seeing more stuff in this area.
Right.
Move it there. Gotcha.
Right.
Yep, no.
And then your pattern can also be like a time of day thing when it comes into this time of year. So like if you've got a camera and you find a good that funnel that we talk about, set it up in that funnel, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, they always go through there, but it seems to be like, right before first light and right after first light. It's always in that morning period of time. Well, when do you think you want to sit there?
Yeah.
Evening? No. Right? And then this is where the learning process starts, because I promise you, if you are a newer hunter and you want to learn, do what I do. Question everything. Okay? And it doesn't mean that you're going to find... Yes, that's it. So it doesn't mean that you're going to find an answer right off the bat. But if you get stubborn about it and you start going... Okay, they're moving through this funnel all the time in the sun in the morning, and you go, I want to go sit there in the morning. Cool, awesome, and you shoot a buck, and great, you have success. And now all of a sudden, the next year you set up a camera in that area, and there's nothing roaming through there, and then you go, okay, well I got to go find some other funnels, and I got to go do this, and I got to do that, and blah blah blah, and maybe you have success again, maybe you don't. But that first one. Why were they moving through there in the morning time? What was happening? And then I'll raise you another one. If they're not going through there in the next year, why that year and not this year? And there's going to be a reason around it. So let's talk about that episode where we just went through a beach forest with no beech nuts.
None.
Right?
That was a huge forest.
Right. But on a good beech nut year, all of a sudden, you'll get pictures all the time through there. But then this year, they're not there. Why? Well, the answer is probably the beech nuts.
I was going to say that whole time we were there, we were seeing signs, but they were old signs.
Yes.
That path was beat down, but it wasn't freshly beat down.
Right. The rubs that we found were old. Right.
Right. So
there you go.
Okay.
So why? I'm seeing this. Why? I'm seeing that. Why? And
food.
I mean, it could go to that. It could go to whatever. There's other reasons too where you could be like, well, maybe it's a specific buck's route, and another buck hasn't picked that one up, and that buck got harvested that year. Right? So I shot that buck, and another buck just hasn't picked up this route yet, or whatever. It could be something as simple as that. It could be like, oh yeah, there was that swamp down there, but then they just logged all around it and it dried up, and it's no longer there, and it's not covered. Well, they were probably moving out of there, or moving into that, or whatever it might be, right? So like, find the micro detail, and then expand it out into the macro as to what's going on. And that can be hard to figure out sometimes. It really can. But if you're stubborn about it, that's when you start to really put pieces of a puzzle together. And your cameras can really help with that portion of it. And that's what I mean by that's what I use cameras for. Is I see this. Why am I seeing it? Am I right? Am I wrong? What are we doing? Right? It's almost like a science experiment. So like there's this spot in a town that I hunt, and the bucks roam through there like crazy, typically just in the second week of November. That's like the hot time that they're roaming through there. And then there's this funnel across town that the bucks roam through during the same period of time, all the time. And in my mind, I'm like, well, that's just the time when they're all roaming. And by the end of November, they've all got a doe by that time, and they're typically kind of tired and blah, 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 blah. That could be a why. There could be a why with that, right? But then all of a sudden, I take my Onyx and I mark that. And then I mark on a road where I always see tracks crossing that road. And then I mark that first funnel where we always see the bucks going through that too. And then I scroll out on my Onyx and I'm like, they're really not that far from each other. And there's kind of a line between them that goes, okay, so they're here. And then I connect over to that one. How would I get from that one to that one? And then I explore those woods in the off season, and all of a sudden I find a big game path, and I'm like, holy moly! I just discovered their line that they are running during that week. It's on the same line, and they're running from this whole ridge line all the way over to this ridge line over here, and this is their track that they go through. Why? It's another why, right? Well, there's this swamp right in the middle of it. They're not going to walk right through the middle of that. They got to get around it. And then after that, they go to this path of least resistance, and then this path of least resistance, and then that path, and then all of a sudden they end up on that last point. Okie dokie. See? So it's like, and then, so you could set up cameras all on that way and figure all that out if you wanted to. It's being that 300, that 24/7 viewpoint on that to help you figure that out. Sure. Use a camera to help confirm or, dispel whatever you got going on. Mm-hmm. But always ask why. And when you get an answer, there's usually a why on top of that you can keep going. And that's how you learn, right?
Why, Dad? Why?
Right. Be that annoying toddler.
And some things are not. Gotcha.
Yeah. Be that annoying toddler. Why? That's what you got to do, and you'll start learning, and you'll start progressing, and it'll be super fun, and it'll be super frustrating all at the same time.
I can't wait to be frustrated.
We're going to see a lot of frustrated bucks here in a couple weeks, I'll tell you that much.
Including this one.
Because that first week in November, they are ready, and the does are not. But side note, that first week in November, you know what is a really great tool? Go over to Walmart and buy some Tinks doe estrus because they're ready, the does aren't. But then when you smell like one that is, they go, oh boy.
You don't look right. You smell right. You don't look right. Give it a shot.
Yep.
What the hell?
Yep.
It's a wild night. Looks like a person.
Right?
I don't know.
I read some. No, this was actually on a podcast that I listened to in Vermont, which is like pretty much the same as New Hampshire. There's not,
kind of.
In terms of like where we are on the map,
topography.
Right? In like the woods are totally different in Vermont. The deer are pretty similar in Vermont, but in Vermont, this study was that actually this might have been at Huntstock that they talked about when the they were able to backtrack when a deer was conceived, and it was like the 20th or 21st or something like that was like the top day that deer were conceived like every year. That beginning of the 20s in November is like when all like the majority of deer were conceived that year.
Interesting.
And it might have even been it was a Rodney Elmer thing that he was the one that was talking about it.
Sounds like the biologists in Vermont are bored.
Yes. Well, if you had that'd be a pretty sweet job. You're like, yeah, I just want to figure out this today.
What are you doing today?
I do that in my
I'm just counting today. Just counting.
Dude, I do that stuff in my spare time. If I could get paid to do that, I mean, come on. You listen to all the studies that I do. Like, that's, here I am reading about it in my spare time, and these people got paid to do this? Great job.
Because you're reading about it in your spare time. You're probably getting paid to read it.
No.
Nope. There's tons of trainings and new technologies, stuff that we have to keep up with.
But I do a lot of driving, okay, and I listen to a lot of things on audiobook and podcast. So
10 and 2.
But anyway, where I was going with that is think about that, and think about that means that is right about when the majority of the does were coming into heat.
Mm-hmm.
The bucks are ready that first week in November. So like 2 weeks, they're sitting there like, come on, ladies, right? Take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
Take advantage of that. Smell like a sexy one that's just ready to go. Because that boy ain't thinking about anything else. Yeah. But anyway, I digress again for the third time.
Yeah.
Trail cameras, since that is the topic.
Yeah.
What else you got for questions on it?
I think we hit all the ones I've got.
Okay. Yeah.
For basic trail cams, like we said, we can go into legal and ethical things, but that seems a bit more advanced.
Yeah, I mean, just don't follow the laws at least.
Don't be an ass.
You know what I mean? Like, because they're there for a reason, you know, and yeah, it's stupid to just start cheating.
People have successfully done it for many years legally.
Yeah.
You don't need to break the rules to screw it up.
Right. Absolutely. And if you're doing it legally, then you're doing it ethically as well. No one can argue. Well, they can argue, but if you're doing it legally, then you've got ground to stand on that you're staying ethical as well, because the laws are there to keep it ethical.
Yeah.
So you can go above and beyond if you want to, and honestly, like, I used trail cameras so much when I was first learning how to hunt that I'm starting to think about decreasing the amount of cameras that I have, because I don't need them as much, because it was so much of that learning that it was helping me with my learning, that now it's like that swamp that I went into the other day. I've never set foot in there, let alone ever had a camera in there. And I saw 3 does while I was down in there. Well, at least 2. I couldn't tell if it was the same one that looped around on me or a sibling of that one. So at least 2, maybe 3. I just uploaded the video of it.
I was watching that.
And I never set foot in there. And I just walk in and I find sign and I set up and I see deer. I'm like, that's cool. That's exciting to me. Like, it's more exciting to me to have that happen
just
than be
like Grandpa did.
But you know, versus like, okay, so I've had something on camera all 3 nights, and I do this, and then and I go there, and he does that same thing that I've seen him do on camera all these times, and then boop, I did it. There's something just more exciting about the authenticity of that trip.
Picking up the dirt, smelling it, putting it in the air, put your ear to the ground.
Wow, you're making this really sound romantic.
It's tough. You taste the dirt a little bit. It's acidic. You know it's just right. All right.
Why do you even need me? It sounds like you got this down.
That's the tree. Yeah.
Yeah.
A pass.
That's the other thing, though. I will say. Side note, me going into a spot where I don't have a tree pre-picked out while I'm in a spot, and I'm like, this is good. Okay, so, because you know me, I never overthink anything. No. I'm sitting there, I'm like, okay, so if I go from that tree, I'm usually about that tall, but then I have that tree right next to it, and then that won't really hide me from a lot, so maybe I want this tree that has some hemlocks around it, and I'd be a little bit more but then if I have that one, I won't have as many shooting lanes over here, and I think that they'll probably go, like, this is my head, right, as I'm standing there. It's a scary place, number one, but number two, it's a very difficult place to just do something fun.
Once you smell that wood burning, get out. It's too late.
Right. So I'll just be standing there like, if we ever do this together, you'll know the moment, because you'll be like, oh, there he is. Yeah. And I'll just be standing there going, just looking around, just staring up at trees, and then I'll move like 10 yards and look at those same trees, but from a different angle. And then I might move another, like I'll just, you'll just be like, I'm just going to stand here until Zach makes a decision. It's going to be a while.
When we put up that tree stand,
yes,
That was a spot you put a tree stand in many times before, correct. And you were still like, my first time out with you, and I'm just like, doop, looks good. But it's not.
That blind we were in the other day, you should have seen me trying to figure out where I was going to put that exactly. Same thing. So I'm not quite over it, but I want to eventually get to the point where I can just go out and do that, everything on a whim, and just let it all happen, and here's the weird portion of it. And we
haven't gotten weird yet?
Well, yeah, we've gotten weird. Well, let's get weirder.
Weirder in the whites.
Should we do a side podcast, Weirder in the Whites?
It's for Halloween. We just tell ghost stories. And they never found him again.
If you just follow your gut, it usually is there for a reason.
It usually brings me to the bathroom. Sorry, it's late.
It is, yeah. But yeah,
follow your gut.
If you sit there, the first tree that you go, that one, that's probably the one that you should sit in. I don't usually do that because then I go, well, what about that? What about that?
How many times do you ever end up in the tree that you originally like, yeah, that's a good tree? Nah, I was right. I should have just gone with that one.
Usually when I harvest deer. And so far this year, I have not done that with that tree. It was actually funny because the next video I'm going to upload, hopefully tomorrow, is the one where I missed on that forkhorn. And I was filming the 4 does. Had I got into the tree that my gut told me to, I'd have been sitting in the middle of those 4 does when they came in.
Moral of the story, stop overthinking.
But then I wouldn't have been in range for that forkhorn either. So everything happens for a reason. I'm sure Mother Nature just wanted to humble me on that shot. So,
well, and that brings us back to the question you had earlier. How does a deer know to look up?
Yeah. Me.
when you go 30 over.
Yeah. Although I don't think he knew what the heck was going on, because he stood there for like 15 minutes like, huh? Because my knock at the end of it is lighted. He just kept on like looking back over at it like, what on earth is that?
If I don't move, he won't see me.
and then like he just kind of like did this weird little tail flick of like, no big deal, and then just started walking away. He's like, I think I'm just... something weird is really going on over here. I'm going to go to the acorns, but I'm going to go around this way.
I'm not going to. This is getting a weird feeling. Yeah. The vibes in this area just aren't there.
Right. And those vibes were me going, God, I hate myself. This is so... yeah. Anyway, it'll be a great video. By the time this podcast comes out, everyone will have watched it.
What's better than hearing about somebody miss? Watching them miss.
I really almost didn't want to upload it, and I still have a choice not to. But I think it is it's a good learning experience for me, so it can be a good learning experience for somebody else.
So when you miss with a bow and arrow, and the arrow's in the ground, do you do that triumphant like pose behind the arrow without your deer there? With the bow laying down?
I should have done that. Oh, that would have been a perfect cover photo for the video. Damn it. That would have been perfect. I was walking up to that arrow. I was honestly just most concerned over just making sure there was no blood on that arrow and that it was a clean miss.
Yeah.
That was the only thing really on my mind, but that would have been fantastic.
Yeah.
Just look at me and my pile of dirt.
Got it. Look at how deep it went. Can't use this one again.
Yeah.
It's like when a fish throws a hook, you hold it.
Yeah.
30 minutes. This is what I got.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I shot my bow to make sure that I was on. Mm-hmm. And oddly enough, that arrow at 20 yards, so not 35, at 20 yards, was like 3 inches high. And so I adjusted my bow, being like, well, great. So my bow was off. Not only did I make a bad shot, but my bow wasn't right. And then I take my other arrows, and they're all now shooting low. So I'm like, okay, so I put my bow back to where it was, and all my other arrows are spot on, but that arrow is still shooting high. Whether or not it's because it went into the ground.
It was Jamaican. It's all about manufacturing. That one was just high. It's where it goes.
Don't worry. Be happy.
No problems, man. You miss. You get another shot. Hey.
Hakuna Matata. Hey.
I'm sorry.
We shouldn't be allowed a podcast at night. Anyway. So, yeah, that's neither here nor there because we're not even on trail cameras anymore.
No. They're just fun stories.
They are.
We finished trail cams.
We're just making people laugh right now at our own expense.
I'm laughing.
Right?
I don't care if you are.
Yeah, this is for us, man. Everybody else can follow along if they want to, but it's for us.
You don't find this funny?
Ultimately.
Check your funny bone.
Good Lord. Should we end it?
No, I think
we'll end it.
That's all, folks.
I've officially lost Buckley completely now.
Okay.
All right, so let's do our end wrap up of like, subscribe, and
tune in.
Share. That was your one on the last one.
Yeah, share.
Sharing's caring.
Sharing is caring.
All right, so like, subscribe, share, please. It helps other people find us.
Still struggling with that.
If you want gear, reach out to us. We'll hook you up with some swag.
Yeah.
But yes, we are still struggling with the subscribers on YouTube, but it has seemed to get better. People are finding us. Now that we figured out if you type in Wild in the Whites podcast, we pop right up.
Yeah.
That's helped a lot. So
we're not the trailer trash video that pops up every time.
Yeah, if you just hit Wild in the Whites, this show Wild in the Wonderful Whites pops up. And it's like some weird deliverance stuff going on that show. So please do not think that we have anything to do with that. Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Swag, we got it.
Yep.
Hit us up. We can ship. We can mail.
And the
Pigeons.
videos. I'm starting to put up videos of my hunts. I know Paul's been posting some pictures from hunts that he has too. We're going to try to get this dude out hunting and get some video of him out doing stuff for the first time. So look for both podcasts and videos to be coming out. This is a busy time. We're not sure exactly what's going to come up and what's going to come up when. I know I keep saying this, but we still keep managing to do it, of getting a podcast out every Saturday.
Yep.
But we may miss some weeks in there, but we're going to try to just get something out to you as much as we can.
This time of year, I mean, we're going to get a video, photos.
Yeah.
There's 4 of us doing 4 separate things.
Yep.
Mass hysteria, cats and dogs living together. It's crazy.
But it's great.
It is.
It's a great
It's
crazy.
wild.
So yeah, I mean, and honestly, the videos are fun. I think that people will enjoy them. So hopefully as much, if not more than the podcast.
Yeah.
So we'll get you stuff, and we're just going to have fun with it. That's what this is all about. Yeah. And hopefully you guys enjoy it. And if you don't, well, unsubscribe.
Yeah, well. Actually, tell your friends first.
Please don't, because we don't have a lot of subscribers.
Stop watching. You don't have to keep watching. Just don't unsubscribe.
I shouldn't have said that.
Subscribe, like, and share.
It's okay if you fire me now. Anyway, so yeah. If you guys have questions, reach out to us. And other than that, enjoy your fall, because we're going to be enjoying ours.
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
All right, guys. Thank you for tuning in. We will see you on the next episode.
Adios.